Have you ever wondered about the origins of the urban legends that send chills down our spines? Those whispered tales that seem to have a life of their own, passed from one frightened soul to another, evolving and morphing with each telling. What if those stories weren't just figments of our imagination, but echoes of something much darker, hidden in the shadows of our reality? Join me as we delve into a world where myths and reality intertwine, where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and where the dark secrets of urban legends are unveiled. But be warned, once you step into this realm, there's no turning back. I never thought I'd end up in Ravenswood. It was one of those towns you only ever heard about in passing, a mere blip on the map that seemed perpetually shrouded in mist and mystery. But life has a way of leading you down unexpected paths, and when I landed a job at the local library, it felt like a fresh start. The town was quaint, with its cobblestone streets and Victorian houses, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something unsettling. The townspeople were kind but reserved, always watching with a hint of wariness. I chalked it up to small-town charm and tried to fit in. My new home was an old, creaky house on the outskirts of town, nestled against the edge of a dense forest. It had character, I told myself, ignoring the way the shadows seemed to linger just a little too long. My first night in the house was restless. Every creak and groan of the old wood seemed amplified in the silence. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down I felt uneasy. As I lay in bed, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I strained to listen, but it faded away as quickly as it had come. I convinced myself it was my imagination, fueled by the stress of the move. Days turned into weeks, and I began to settle into a routine. The library was a sanctuary, filled with the comforting scent of old books and the quiet rustle of pages. One evening, as I was closing up, Mrs. Whitaker, an elderly woman who frequented the library, approached me. "You must be new to Ravenswood," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Be careful, dear. There are things in this town that are best left undisturbed." Before I could ask her what she meant, she shuffled away, leaving me with a sense of foreboding. That night as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The streets were deserted, the only sound the soft crunch of my footsteps on the gravel. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, but there was no one there. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started digging into the town's history. The library's archives were a treasure trove of old newspapers and faded photographs. One name kept cropping up: the Hollow Man. According to the legend, he was a man wrongfully accused of witchcraft in the 17th century. The townspeople, in their fear and ignorance, had buried him alive in an unmarked grave in the forest. His spirit, they said, still wandered the woods, seeking vengeance. The more I read, the more I felt an inexplicable connection to the Hollow Man. It was as if his story was calling out to me, begging to be told. One stormy night, unable to sleep, I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying like skeletal arms. The wind howled through the leaves, carrying with it that same whisper I had heard my first night in the house. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing down like a suffocating blanket. Just as I was about to turn back, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a crumbling, moss-covered gravestone. The inscription was barely legible, but I could make out the words "Hollow Man." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in and I fumbled for my phone. As I turned it on, its weak light revealed a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. My breath caught in my throat. The figure was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadow. "Who are you?" I managed to croak, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to move towards me, its footsteps silent on the forest floor. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and rocks. The figure loomed closer and I could see its eyes, hollow and empty, reflecting nothing but darkness. I don't remember how I made it back to the house, but I burst through the door, slamming it shut behind me. My heart was racing, and I was covered in cold sweat. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, my imagination running wild, but deep down I knew better. The whispers grew louder in the following days, echoing through the halls of the house. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and I felt a constant oppressive presence. Sleep became a distant memory, and I found myself jumping at the slightest sound. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard a soft knock on the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Whitaker standing on the porch, her expression grave. "You shouldn't have gone into the forest," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Hollow Man is restless. You've awakened something that should have stayed buried. I tried to explain, to ask for her help, but she shook her head. There's only one way to put him to rest, she said. You must find his true grave and lay his spirit to rest. With Mrs. Whitaker's words haunting me, I began my search for the Hollow Man's true grave. The forest was vast and treacherous, and I had no idea where to start. I spent days poring over maps and old documents, trying to piece together the clues. One night, as I was sifting through the archives, I came across an old diary belonging to one of the town's founders. The entries were faded and difficult to read, but one passage stood out. We buried him beneath the old oak, where the shadows dance and the earth weeps. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Armed with this new information, I ventured back into the forest. The wind was cold, and the trees seemed to whisper warnings as I made my way deeper into the woods. After hours of searching, I finally found it. The old oak, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like twisted fingers. I began to dig, the earth damp and heavy. The whispers grew louder, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Just as I was about to give up, my shovel struck something solid. I cleared away the dirt, revealing a small weathered box. Inside was a collection of bones, wrapped in tattered cloth. As I held the box, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, and the whispers became deafening. The Hollow Man appeared before me, his hollow eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. I could feel his rage, his anguish, and his desire for vengeance. You were wronged, I said, my voice trembling. But I can help you find peace. The Hollow Man stared at me, and for a moment I thought he would attack. But then, slowly, he nodded. I placed the box back into the ground and covered it with earth. As I did, the wind died down and the whispers faded away. The Hollow Man's figure began to dissolve, the darkness lifting from his eyes. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Rest now, I replied, my heart heavy with emotion. The days following that night were a blur. The oppressive presence lifted, and the house felt lighter, more welcoming. The townspeople seemed to sense the change too, their wary expressions softening into genuine smiles. Mrs. Whitaker visited me one last time, her eyes filled with gratitude. You've done a great service to this town, she said. The Hollow Man can finally rest thanks to you. Life in Ravenswood returned to normal, but I knew I would never forget the Hollow Man or the dark secrets that had once haunted the town. The experience had changed me, deepening my understanding of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't help but wonder about the other urban legends that lurked in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. And with a shiver of anticipation, I knew that my journey into the darkness was far from over. Months passed, and the memory of the Hollow Man began to fade, replaced by the rhythm of everyday life. Yet the allure of urban legends remained, a constant whisper at the back of my mind. I continued my work at the library, uncovering stories of the strange and supernatural, but nothing ever came close to the terror and wonder of my encounter with the Hollow Man. One evening, as I was closing up, I found a package on my desk. Inside was an old leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. There was no note, no indication of who had left it, but as I flipped through the pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. The book was filled with tales of haunted places and restless spirits, each story more chilling than the last, and at the very end there was a passage that caught my eye. In every legend there is a grain of truth, in every whisper a voice longing to be heard. The darkness is never far, and the secrets it holds are waiting to be unveiled. As I read those words, I felt a familiar shiver of anticipation. The journey into the unknown was far from over, and I knew that the dark secrets of urban legends would continue to call to me, urging me to unveil the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows. And with a mixture of fear and excitement, I prepared to answer that call, ready to step once more into the realm where myths and reality intertwine.